the Tachanka, the Russian war wagon. In an era of constant technological innovation, some countries resorted to more primitive methods to wage war. At a time when tanks were rolling their way across battlefields and aircraft took to the skies in ever-increasing numbers, Russian forces made extensive use of the Tachanka, a war wagon that would not have seemed out of place in the ancient world. Using horse-drawn carts as a weapons platform is as old as civilization itself. Chariots in the ancient world were used by armies as far back as the Bronze Age. During the early 15th century, the Hussites utilized large numbers of war wagons to devastating effect against their enemies. Like its predecessors, the Tachanka is a simple concept. It's a four-wheeled cart that could be drawn by a team of 2 to 4 horses. Mounted on the back of the vehicle is a rear-facing machine gun. The name Tachanka, or the plural Tachankye, has several possible origins. One of these is that this is a derivative of the Ukrainian word netichanka, a type of carriage that has its origin in what is now the Czech Republic. Another possibility is that it's the Ukrainian variant of the Russian word takcha, or wheelbarrow. Machine guns mounted on horse-drawn carts has also been utilized by other nations as well, including the British and the Germans, though these were primarily used as a method of transport. This concept was also adopted by the Imperial Russian Army at the turn of the 20th century and was used on the Eastern Front during the First World War. The main innovation of the Tachanka was in its use as a mobile firing platform. After the fall of the Tsarist regime and the subsequent civil war, the Tachanka gained popularity on all sides of the conflict. In the aftermath of the Great War, a new battle begins, a battle to return home. I'm here to introduce you to Last Train Home, a game where your survival is just the beginning of the journey. Take command of an armored train and navigate the treacherous paths of a war-torn land. Your mission? To bring Czechoslovak soldiers back to their newborn republic through an unforgiving terrain and amidst the chaos of Russia's red and white armies. Think you've got what it takes? Last Train Home combines real-time strategic combat of Company of Heroes with intense resource and squad management of XCOM. If you've ever felt the thrill of leading troops in Frostpunk or Men of War 2, this is the challenge you've been waiting for. Every decision you make could mean life or death. Manage your resources, maintain morale, and keep your unit in fighting shape. Survive an epic journey where the life of one can safeguard the lives of many. But remember, these soldiers are not just units. They're also people. People with stories, dreams, and a longing to return home, uncover their tales, hone their skills, and feel the weight of every loss on this monumental journey. With harsh weather, scarce resources, and a tired crew, every choice is a moral dilemma. Your strategic prowess and leadership will be tested like never before. As you play, you can delve into the field manual to uncover real-life story behind the heroic Czechoslovak Legion. Last Train Home isn't just a game, it's a tribute to history, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Are you ready to embark on this survival journey? After the war, the journey home begins. Join us on The Last Train Home by clicking the link in the description. Available now on PC. The Tachanka was an ideal choice for the rebels and other underfunded groups. In theory, any cart or wagon can be easily converted for military use. Simply mount a heavy machine gun on the back of a horse-drawn vehicle, and it's ready for action. Tachanki were extensively used in southern Russia and Ukraine, where the local populace lived an agrarian lifestyle. This meant that new recruits already had a familiarity with horse-drawn vehicles and could be sent to action with little extra training, a significant advantage for revolutionaries who didn't have the time nor resources to train on more complex vehicles such as tanks. They were also made out of wood and could be built or repaired by a skilled carpenter without the need for complex factories. Unlike most other horse-drawn weapons platforms, the Tachanka was not merely a transport system, which would require the cumbersome process of unloading the gun, setting it up, and then repacking the weapon when it was time to move. On the Tachanka, the machine gun was fixed to the cart, which made it more efficient to deploy, though it could be removed from the Tachanka if necessary. Simply position the cart so the machine gun faces the enemy, and it's ready for action. The crew of the Tachanka could vary, but at the very least required 3 men to operate, a driver and 2 to work the machine gun, a gunner and his assistant. There were some Tachanki that had 2 machine guns, requiring a larger crew, but these were comparatively rare. In spite of its often and ad hoc nature, there was an attempt to standardize the armament of the Tachanka. For the most part, they were equipped with a PM M1910 machine gun, a variant of the Maxim gun, chambered in the Russian standard 7.62 by 54mm R round. The Tachanka could be used both offensively and defensively. When in battle, it relied heavily on speed and mobility. When on the offensive, this allowed them to maneuver to tactically important locations, able to support both infantry and cavalry advances with heavy machine gun fire, or catch a vulnerable enemy unaware on the flanks. If on the defensive, they could provide rapidly deployed covering fire to protect a withdrawal from the battlefield. In either role, it could deploy quickly to where it was needed most, and didn't have to waste precious time setting up the weaponry. An advantage over conventional gun carriages, because the machine gun was invariably mounted to the back of a vehicle, hopefully facing the enemy. In an emergency, it could simply drive off, with no need for any further action to get away as fast as possible. There were some disadvantages, however. Despite what is seen in propaganda films and in images, a Tachanka on the move was an unstable firing platform and was only really effective when it was stationary. As it was an open-topped vehicle almost always made from wood, the crew was exposed to enemy fire. They were particularly vulnerable to artillery fire and relied heavily on their mobility to stay safe. One of the major innovators in the use of the Tachanka was Nestor Makhno, who was often credited with its invention, though this is difficult to confirm. He founded an army of Ukrainian anarcho-communist separatists, known officially as the Revolutionary Insurrectionary Army of Ukraine, and informally as the Anarchist Black Army, and fought both the Reds and the Whites in subsequent fighting after the Russian Revolution. Unlike his opponents, Makhno did not have access to a large reserve of manpower, as he was unable to conscript his forces. Instead, he had to make do with an army a fraction of the size of his enemies. Facing an opposing force in a head-on engagement would inevitably lead to disaster, which required the adoption of unconventional tactics. It was under these conditions that the Tachanka came into its own. The area Makhno and his forces operated in was the open steppe of Ukraine and southern Russia, an area lacking strategic choke points, where a smaller force can bottleneck a larger one, and was generally without cover, making ambushes and other conventional guerrilla tactics difficult. Instead, emphasis had to be placed on speed, mobility, and firepower. Using the Tachanka as the backbone of his forces, Makhno outmaneuvered both the Reds and the Whites. In a series of campaigns, the Black Army rode rings around their opponents, able to cover large areas quickly, taking their enemies totally by surprise. Unlike most other gun carriages, the Tachanka could carry its own ammunition and other supplies, meaning it had less of a need for a baggage train, increasing its mobility even further. Makhno and his army would strike deep into enemy territory, attacking rear areas, baffling both the Whites and the Reds. In this way, his army was able to hold their own against the numerically superior foe. After the Russian Civil War, Tachanki were employed by a number of Eastern European militaries. They would be adopted by Poland, where they would be known as Tachankas. At first, Polish forces made use of any cart or wagon that was available, though later on would be standardized into factory models. Armament on these Polish vehicles was likewise improvised, mounting Maxim guns, the M1914 Hotchkiss machine gun, the M1917 Browning .30 caliber machine gun, or anything else that was available at the time. Later versions would be standardized to use the CKM WZ-30, the Polish version of the American M1917 Browning. Tachankas would be used extensively by Polish forces during the Polish-Soviet War, and later on during the Second World War against German forces. After the Civil War, the Soviet Union also made use of them. Their vehicles would also be standardized, which led to the creation of the Boevaya Konno-Pulitmetnaya Tachanka, or horse-drawn machine gun cart, M1926. The official variant entered service with the Red Army in 1928. Most would be equipped with a PM 1910 Maxim machine gun, though there were also versions that mounted mortars and others that contained communication equipment for command and control purposes. It was decreed that a team of 4 horses would pull the vehicle. Just like during the Revolution, the Tachanka allowed the Red Army to mobilize a significant fighting force from the rural peasant population quickly, without requiring extensive training on more complex vehicles. While these did see some action during the Finno-Soviet War and the Second World War, it was clear that they were an anachronism of a bygone era, their role as a fast-moving weapons platform now more effectively accomplished by the use of armored cars and light tanks, and the Tachanka faded from use. As they were constructed from wood, many Tachanka were destroyed or damaged beyond repair over the years, leaving very few original models still in existence. Most of these are visible in museums, and reproductions are a fixture of many military parades in Russia to this day. Though they were an outdated concept at their inception, Tachanki played an important role in the history of Eastern Europe, and though they soon fell out of favor, their impact was much larger than their simple concept would suggest.